so yes, that's fantastic. And of course, the answers to this are kind of interesting because since there's no one way to organize the authorities of play, and theoretically, any organization across the people in any way theoretically can work. The question is what's best for this game. And the other question, too, is that as long as we're not screwing around with the authorities, then there's no bad way either. I mean, theoretically, I mean, across games. So that means all we have to do is to know how it's done. When you don't know how it's done, then everything gets murky and people like say things and they're not sure if the other person is supposed to agree to it, or they shout out things to kind of elbow their shit into play, or there's generally a breakdown in the sense of communication about just what is and what's happening at any level, right? The big or small. It could be about like whether you get to hit that guy with an axe, or it could be about whether the Dark Lord has taken over this town or not before we got here. I mean, so it could be about any of these things at any level. But when you don't know who gets to say that word, even if it's just yes, based on what someone else said, if you don't know who that is, then play gets weird. I've been in weird moments of play hundreds of times on this basis. So here, it's kind of interesting because you've got, I could have used that Dharma, or wait, I did use that Dharma point relative to a very local outcome authority. How well did I succeed in this thing? How well did I do this thing or say this thing? I get my reroll and I have a Dharma point, right? And I say to the, now I'm going to, so that was all about me. I had that job basically, of whether to do that or not. And so then the next question is, what does this thing turn into? What sort of, I mean, it's like money burning a hole in your pocket, right? I mean, where does it go, right? What does this turn into fictionally? So, if the way you said it up until now was that the player gives it to the Doomsmith, that's very clear, and the Doomsmith, either through the use of a chart, I don't know what the instrument is. It doesn't. I mean, it matters actually, but for our current purposes, all I care about is that there is some sort of instrument, whatever it is. The Doomsmith uses it. Now, isn't it kind of more fun for the player not to have a voice in this? They already had their voice in the process by making the Dharma point in the first place. They're basically the one who coined it, the one who they're the Federal Reserve. They got to make the money, right? they
right.
So, I mean, in most sane societies, you have a treasury, a government treasury that makes the money, but we're weird in the States, so whatever. So anyway,
right. Yeah.
But that aside, somebody makes the money and says, this is legal tender. And so it's kind of at that, and the process of doing that actually already had an impact on play. Isn't part of the fun to now see what return impact comes in from someone else because this now exists? If I have to do it, it's kind of like I rolled this rock up to the top of the hill and now I'm the one who gets to push it down the other side. Well, that's no fun.
Yeah,
you know, I want to push it up to the top and then see where you roll it. Right? Does that make sense? I mean, it's at least there. I'm not saying it's a hard and fast rule. I am saying that that's at least something to consider.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense. It does. But okay. So what about this sort of scenario, right? Because you talked about like the situation and what's in your face. So let's say that we do that thing, and the Dark Lord takes over the town, but the player is in a position to do something about it, right? So like say that they're the captain of the guard.
Right.
So when the Dark Lord comes in, you know, is it a thing? Well, it was a Dharma point, so you lose, and this is how things change. Or is it a thing where it's contested? Okay, the
Right.
Dark Lord tries to
Right.
take the town, and because you're in a
That's right.
position to do it.
Exactly. And this also leads to another question, which is actually pretty serious because we have to answer before we can address that. When the game master gets a Dharma point, are they supposed to apply it to the situation being played right now? Or do they bank it for some next situation that we're in?
Yeah, it goes later. It
Right.
typically
So if
like
it's later, then that
like that's how we've
question,
been doing it.
right? If it comes later, and for like the next town to be simplistic, um, then that is actually easier to answer that question. It's cleaner if that makes any sense, right? It's not like you have
Mhm.
kind of a chase. It's like turning around and biting your own tail to make this situation weirder. We're already in this situation, right? We will cope with it here, and so you still want the chance for this situation to get better, the one that you're in. There's no point in getting this roll if you're just going to darken this one up. So
Mhm.
I hear you on this. This makes a lot of sense. So okay, I'm the Doomsmith. You got your freaking re-roll and you freaking succeeded when you did that thing. So good for you. But I have my Dharma point now. Who knows? Maybe I have a whole handful of them. And I look at this next situation, and now we turn to the procedure of situation preparation. Because if I'm going by what you were into when you designed the previous game and the way you're talking now, the last thing you want, if I'm not mistaken, is to prepare because I want it to turn out a certain way. If I'm the Doomsmith,
Exactly.
yeah, we don't want that, right? I mean, we've had a belly full of that shit, haven't we? Right?
Mhm.
And so, therefore,
Yep.
therefore, I need some kind of rubric for creating the next situation. It might not even be very mechanistic. There are very mechanistic processes for doing that, and then there are much less mechanistic processes for doing that, and that's fine as long as it's a process of some kind. So I know what to do so that I can say, okay, I've done these things, I'm ready to play, and I know when to stop. Because if I don't stop, I'm going to start scripting.
Right.
Right. So once I know what that is for your game, speaking of as me as the Doomsmith, not me as the consultant. But once I, as the Doomsmith, know what that is for your game, then very legitimately, I can take those Dharma points and apply it in a way that I couldn't do if I didn't have the Dharma points. So that's what we need to do to answer that question is what is the Doomsmith's task list for coming up with the next situation? And so if you think about it, there's sort of two trajectories. One is the trajectory of plain old fictional cause of whatever it is that's happened already. Is it or isn't it going to impact the next situation? If we jump all the way across the world, maybe what we just did here won't impact the next situation very directly. Or maybe the next situation is affected very greatly by what has happened here, whichever. So, but we have to understand what the last, everything played so far, or going on up above, right, or going on conceptually, how much of that is going to hit that next situation? Because we need to know what to do to set this new situation up. Once those ideas are in place, Then the Dharma points, now we know what the Dharma points do, and we know what to do if we don't have them too.
I see.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So that's the task, really. If we have these questions nailed down, that's great. But the fact is, I'm pretty sure that you have actually applied that very thinking already, just through practice, right? So the question is not necessarily designing it out of some abstract tinker toy, but more in terms of saying, well, what are you doing?
Right.
It is almost axiomatic that the things that we are personally the best at in conducting play, either as a player or a GM or for whatever game, whatever we're best at is exactly the one thing we're not going to explain when we explain the game. Right? You're going to leave that right out. It'll be just like this
Right.
huge blank chapter should be here and it's not there. Why? You would be like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it never occurred to me to explain that, right? Anybody would do that,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that's the first thing I would ask is, what are you doing when they kind of complete a situation? Basically the played situation hits its break point, and whatever's going to happen has happened there. Um, and there comes, for lack of a better word, a somewhat incontrovertible sense that we're done with this place, or we're done with this particular set of relationships or issues in this place. Whatever, whatever the sources of tension were. And so then, even if the characters don't go anywhere, there's usually a shift of some kind. Okay, next spring, or something like that,
Mhm.
or anything of the kind. Often, of course, a shift in space. We'll pick up again on a ship sailing away from there. There's some sort of shift of that kind that lets us know we're in a new situation now, whatever it may be. So I can't, of course, know, but you can. You can say, the last time that happened, now what did I do? Especially if I was trying not to pre-script what was supposed to happen in this new place, which is a tough job for a lot of people. They may find themselves, they could have sworn to me that they never railroad their characters, but every situation they make up has a destined sense of what the proper climax there is going to be. So sometimes it's a little bit alarming for people to, they would have sworn they never directed what their players were supposed to do, but then they realize when they create the next situation, they can't conceive of the players doing anything except getting to that spot where the princess is imprisoned.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we're avoiding that, then we really have to think about situation creation and when does it properly stop so that things can happen in play, whatever, and we don't know what they will all be, or at least how they'll turn out. So all of this is striking me as pretty interesting for your game, because interaction with the setting and its darkened qualities, or its grimmer sort of apocalyptic qualities, is kind of everything. I wanted to bring up one more point because you mentioned you'd been doing some play, of this design in progress, right? And I think that's a good thing. I've been really promoting something lately that I call playful play, and telling people that this is the real design play. When you've got a couple of thoughts about how it might go, and you get in with some people and you play through some of it, and you're not play testing in the sense of trying to break it or testing it like product testing, right? You're
Right.
just seeing if it's fun this time. And it's okay if it sticks around in the design for a while or evolves into a different form. It's okay if you throw up your hands and say, "What was I thinking? I never want to see those notes again."
Mhm.
It's okay but the point too is that if you're playing with the right people, they're not design conferencing with you. They're not saying, this is, oh, I felt this way, or that's not good, or making what I call the motorboat noise. The
Mhm.
motorboat noise, right? But, and
Mhm. Mhm.
and if you have that kind of dynamic with your friends, and they're doing this because they kind of love you, and you've got this problem called
Mhm.
game design, and they're helping you manage it, right? So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and they like playing, right? So anyway, if you're doing that and the design can kind of emerge from those interactions, it's way better than some sort of thing where you're too wrapped up in the final product and have a deadline and are already planning your Kickstarter and all that crap. So
Right.
yeah, so it sounds like you're kind of in a good space for that. What do you think?
Yeah, actually, because with the whole like publishing deadline, all of that stuff, I see that as like a secondary thing.
Oh
I
yeah,
want the game
that's
to be the game,
future use problem,
right?
right? Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So, and with my friends, I have two groups that we run, kind of like alternating weeks. So, get to see very different mindsets. I have some guys who are way more creative in
right,
their thinking. They're more about the story, and then some other guys are more D&D guys who are thinking in terms of um, how to say like risk reward,
right.
looking at the rules as winning kind of thing. So, uh, just playing with that, and and just trying to craft scenes that are fun
Yeah,
and just enjoy ourselves. Every
that's
once in a while,
right.
step in and say, "Okay,
Yeah,
we're gonna change this. I'm
that's
sorry.
right. Yeah,
I'm nerfing this, or I'm adding this."
perfect,
And
perfect.
they, yeah, and
That's
they roll with it.
the playful quality that you're describing is exactly the best state to be designing from. I think. Um,
Good.
it made a huge difference to me when I started thinking in those terms. And I've been promoting it a lot, especially in today's environment where it is exceptionally easy to slap a layout on anything and run a Kickstarter and then put it up on drive through. It's just so logistically exciting to do that
Hmm.
that again, like just like you said, the game design basically ends up being kind of an alpha, you know, and never gets past that. So I think,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's great. I mean, I won't crank on about that anymore, but you can see it's on my mind. All right, I'll talk to you later on. Great to hear from you.
Uh, yeah. You too. Thanks, Ron.